Okay, so
Oh.
this conversation is just going to be all about the state of pharmacy residency.
Current climate of pharmacy education. Well,
Okay,
residency. This is
residency education.
this because we've done an education assessment, but
And
this
people
is
love that episode.
they really you were telling you're like that episode got traction. It's like
It did, it really did. And I think that's why people want us to talk more about like the latest pharmacy news on that
yeah,
poll. So I think they just really like it when we tell it like
we
it is.
chime in. We chime in.
Welcome to the Hey RX Friends We Got This podcast, where we share our thoughts on the pharmacy profession, experiences as healthcare providers, and explore our identities as two women of color going after it all.
As we share our stories, we hope you laugh, maybe cry, and feel inspired as you get to know us. At the end of the day, remember, friends, we got
We got
this.
this.
Hi, Thu.
Hi, Saley. How is it going?
It's going. It's busy season.
It is. But look at you. You're so excited. It's like busy
I,
season and it's energizing you.
it's like I
Look
don't
at your
know.
face.
It's like passion project, busy season. I love, this is usually the time I ghost social media, but I'm at
Ooh.
a stage where I can't do that anymore. It's harmful for the brand that we are building for me to ghost ever now. So I'm learning this new phase of like continuous engagement online and experimenting with content creation and
Hmm.
finding inspirations with other creators. But I'm like ironically having fun because
Ironically, what do you mean? It's
because
always fun.
no,
Content creating is the
it's
best.
for you. For you. Because you just sit there and it's like, oh, we'll do it this way, this way, this way, this way. And then it's like, oh, it's so beautiful. It's perfect. For me, it's like, oh, no, I can't do it that way. No, no, no. That sounds crazy. No, that so learning to disconnect,
Hmm. Yeah.
mentally and just let this stuff flow. That's been fun.
Yeah.
That's
Well, you got a new ring light. Look at you. It's
yeah,
time.
I'm up in my content creation game. I got a new ring. The ring light I had died on me. So RIP. Now, now I had to invest in a new ring light and I am giddy. Like this is stuff that I never used to get excited about. But we get on today and it's the first thing I wanted to tell Thu. Like, "Thu, my new ring light came in. Could
Yeah.
you tell?" And she's like, what?
I know. It's always the most disappointing when you're like, it's so exciting. Look what I did. They're like, oh,
I'm like,
didn't
what? What do
notice.
you mean, what? Oh man.
But if you guys are watching on YouTube, I am wearing my glasses today, so you all know what that means. Does anyone know what that means? No, people are like, we do not know what that means.
Tell us what that means so we are prepared if we ever saw it again. We're like, uh-oh.
We've got some deep diving
Deep diving
stuff
and
kind of thing
reading.
going on. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I printed
Yeah.
out I printed out articles.
You
I
sh-
highlighted stuff.
you did. You're not kidding when you say
No,
deep
this
dive.
this is a legitimate I did research for this, you guys. So I'm super excited to just jump
Me
right
too.
into it. Oh.
Yes.
Okay, well, I put out a poll again on Instagram, and a lot of you guys really want us to talk about the latest RX news.
Yeah.
And I get it. You know, we're interesting people. We have interesting thoughts, and we have interesting ideas to share. And are we the
Uh-huh.
most qualified people to talk about some of these news? I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Well, and also, we never claimed that we were. So
Yes, that's true.
it's, yeah, like we didn't come in here, it was like, we are the expert of A to Z. No, we just said that we had thoughts and opinions to give on some of the stuff that's popping off and that you would hear that.
That's
That's what we
very true.
and we are delivering
Yeah,
on
and
that.
you're the ones listening, so you know that's how it goes, I suppose. But
Exactly.
um, but Before we jump into what we're going to talk about today, which is all about the climate of residency training, which has changed so much since I've started my own
Gosh.
residency journey.
Yeah.
Before we jump into all of that, if you are watching on YouTube, please leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe, and let us know what you're up to. What do you think about the climate of residency right now? And if you're listening to us, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rate and write a review. But most importantly, please share the episode to
Yes.
people. Let the people know why we are the best companions when you're walking your dog, doing the dishes, driving around, and we are your pharmacy, besties. So
We really are.
join the group, join the chat.
Yes. And on the topic of community, there's something super exciting that I don't want us to forget to tell everyone. There is a LinkedIn community that we have created. We are actively building that community up. We want the content and information that we share there to be something that is relevant to you. But I think what I really, really am excited and hope that the LinkedIn group really can do for us, all of us, is it could be a place where you could come tell us what's popping. Like, tell
Mm-hmm.
us your thoughts, your reactions to something we've said. But help us grow that community and create that safe space where um, anyone in pharmacy, anywhere in your career, you can come there and drop your question or your observation, and we will engage as a community there.
Yeah. And we're also going to be posting, our own kind of professional development types of content on there. So if you
Yeah.
feel lost in your career, your journey so far, that's where you're going to get a lot of that information outside of the podcast. And if you're just
Yes.
needing, I don't know, a group to help support each other, because that's what community is all about. Um,
100%.
I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and there is a lot of isolation that's happening in the world. There's a lot of depression and anxiety, and I think connecting with people who are like-minded is one of the best ways to kind of overcome that. So, yeah, come join us. We're here for you.
Yeah.
Um, okay.
Ooh.
So I don't know where you
Mm.
want to begin with residency, because this is going to be a big topic and I don't know how much we can cover, and I will be good about keeping us on track.
Yes,
Yes,
please.
please. But let's talk about the data that you were showing me earlier today.
Yeah.
I really
Um,
want us to dig deep into this and understand what's happening.
yeah, I think so it's no secret that the profession as a whole, we are all feeling a shift in temperature, a shift in sentiment, a shift in perspective and outlook. And many of us are attributing that shift to the pandemic and COVID and the restructuring of our way of life, and many of us rethinking about what we think is important to us and where work, our profession, fits into that, right? Pharmacy residency has been in place for a really long time. We're not going to give anybody a history lesson on how long. Let's assume with us that this is an institution that is very well established, its purpose, its goals, and ASHP pretty much runs the show on this. And every year, after the match cycle, the match results come out, they publish statistics about the match. They tell, and this is public information, it's on natmatch.com, but I always just Google ASHP match statistics to be able to see it. And it tells us the number of applicants, the number of positions that were offered, the number of matched or positions that were filled, the number of unmatched applicants, and the number of unfilled positions. Reason why I find this report so important and impactful, as all of you know, in my personal business, that it's residency. I help candidates get in somewhere. So I always study these numbers to try to see if they could tell me a story about what's going on. Some things we are seeing that I am very confident and comfortable in calling a trend is that there is a consistent and sustained decrease in the number of applicants to the match since 2019. So we see 2019 really being the peak where we almost had like 8,000 applicants that year, when the number of position offered was somewhere only around like 4,200. So you almost have like double the number of people around the 2019 year.
It's like a 2 to
And
1. Two
literally
applicants to one position.
to one position. We've gone from that now, where in 2020, understandably, there was a drop, but then that drop has been sustained, and there's an exponential drop between 2021 and 22, another exponential drop in 23, and we see that drop kind of leveling off, but a drop nevertheless. But we are now closer to like the 6,000 mark, and the number of position offered, that has actually increased. So
I'm really shocked about that.
yeah, the number of positions offered has increased. And you hear a lot of people talk about the match rates have improved. The match rates have improved. And I believe that match rates are improving because we have more positions, and if the number of applicants is decreasing and the number of positions is increasing, that gap is slightly smaller. So of course, we expect the match rate to kind of reflect that. But these numbers are signaling that whatever the shift in the profession, where we have more pharmacists advocating for better working conditions and things like that, it's affecting residency application. And we can't believe that the impact of what we've been talking about since we started this podcast, that it's only happening in this compartmentalized space of pharmacists that are working or unhappy. The students are paying attention to what's happening, and they are choosing alternative professional routes for themselves. It's concerning because we're advocating for more, right? we're advocating for prescriptive authority for PrEP. We're advocating for pharmacists to be able to do a lot of novel, advanced clinical things that require highly trained individuals. That's why this is so alarming for me to see that it didn't just happen in 2021, but we're seeing like this sustained decline, and advocacy is going for more, for us to do more, but we're not getting that same interest of people.
Oh, I feel like now we're getting into like very muddy territory. Now we're talking about a lot of different issues happening kind of at once. And
What?
let's here's the
They
thing.
don't happen in silos though, right? Like
No.
I don't believe that one tiny issue is the reason why this is happening. Another thing I believe could be a contributing factor is that people are more vocal about what they are experiencing in residency. Social media has allowed us to become more free in openly talking about what we are experiencing in different places. There are entire Reddit threads that are dedicated to making sure don't go there. Don't go there. They eat residents there. Don't go there.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's kind of nice because social media does allow accountability to happen.
yes,
But that's always so tough. Because
it is.
you think about social media, for example, and if you ever look at like rating for a restaurant, right? And you
Mhm.
see like, oh, the restaurant has like a 3.5 star, and we're like, ooh, okay, that restaurant must suck. But a lot of times, most people want to be more negative than positive. And if you go to a restaurant and you had such an amazing time, you don't immediately think, I'm going to post that on the internet. But if you had a horrible time, you're like, I am going to put that place on
Yes,
blast. No
yes,
one should go here, yada, yada, yada.
yes.
And,
We are
it's,
far more motivated to share our negative experiences than we are the positive. And
yeah.
one of my rotations in pharmacy leadership and management, my director kind of showed me this example of this, and it was when patients have a great experience at the hospital, those letters are so short. It's like 10 sentences. This nurse was amazing. She took care of my kids. She made sure my pets were fed, like straight to the point. But when the patients have a negative experience, as director, he goes through nurses' complaints. He's like, I when I open the email and the email is like, I have to scroll down to read it, I know they're not calling me to rave about a pharmacist's service. This is a complaint. And
Oh.
that's so true.
Yeah,
That's
it's
so
very
true.
true. So let's talk about the numbers real quick, and I want to ask you a couple of clarifying questions. When you say that the number of positions are opened up, do we know, it doesn't break it down into what types of positions, right? Like what
It
types of
does.
it does.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
oh
It
my
does.
goodness. Okay.
We can tell, it tells us like if the majority of the positions were PGY1. So what we know is that AmCare focused PGY1 positions and AmCare focused PGY2 positions have had the largest explosion since the pandemic.
Oh, and
Right?
as an acute care pharmacist, I feel like
We are winning right now.
no.
The AmCare folks, we're winning right now. Right? And we can kind of, you can also see that, like, I think when we graduated, it was ID or critical care. That's like where a lot of people wanted to
Or
go.
oncology, I
Or
think.
oncology.
People loved
That's
oncology
right.
back then. Yeah.
Yeah, but now
Ugh.
almost majority of students, they all are interested in this AmCare focus, clinic focus
Mm,
type of training and learning.
interesting.
And that's kind of reflected in what like the increase in openings are. But I think
Are there
uh,
any that's not even in like a clinical setting? Is there a lot of like compounding? Do we know that like community, for example, we don't, it doesn't break it
no,
down like that? Mm.
no, unless I am in the wrong
No, that's
view.
okay. I'm just curious. I'm very curious about all of
Yeah,
that. So numbers of positions are going up, applicants are going down, and
yeah,
it's kind of related to the 2020 mark. It's almost like
yes,
2019 was the peak and then it drops after.
yes.
Um, and you seem to attribute a lot of that trend to people being more vocal about their experiences in healthcare training, which we all know, not just in pharmacy, but healthcare training can be a feeding ground for abusive behavior. Um,
100%.
which is, abusive is such a strong word.
But it's accurate though. Like
And
let's
so
not
let's let's
call
break
it
that
something
down.
else.
Let's break it down.
No,
No, let's break it
no.
down.
I want to full stop it at abusive, abuse of authority, abuse of power, abuse of trust. It is abuse to me in every single facet when I think about it and I look at it. Because for me, RPDs entrust their residents in the hand of preceptors. And some programs are straight up desperate for preceptors. We find you could find yourself in the hands of a person that has zero interest in being a preceptor, but the RPD has an obligation to fulfill a commitment. And all of these we can sugarcoat it, right? Like mismatch in learner and teaching style. There's a mismatch. We could call it that, but um it's toxic. That's it. That's
Okay.
my only time I'm going to disagree with you.
Well, what do you like? So, what do you categorize as toxic? Because if you use the word toxic, and I gave you this, I sent you this article. It's being well while doing well, distinguishing necessary from unnecessary discomfort in training.
Yes.
And so, this article brings up a really good point: is if you call everything toxic,
Uh-huh.
then nothing actually will get fixed. And so this is why it is so important to distinguish then what is the balance between the rigors of training and
Yeah.
actual abusive toxic behaviors. Because if
Yes.
you're going to be making a change, you need to actually pinpoint exactly what is wrong and fix
100%.
that, and instead of being like, I'm not happy and therefore everything is wrong.
Yes.
Right? Because when you're
100%.
talking about medical training, it is hard
Yeah.
in
It's
nature
supposed to be.
itself. It's probably one of the hardest things that you'll have to go through because what you do is so important. It's like life or
Yes.
death.
Yes.
And
Literally.
so it's literally life or death. And so then where do you draw the line, right? Because we
Yeah.
can't just say it's abusive, it's toxic, but then nothing ever gets done because we can't distinguish between one or the other.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly with that assessment. The challenge that I believe we have in pharmacy is we have not invested much in identifying that pinpoint, those pressure points that we are talking about. We haven't invested the way the medical field, our counterparts in the medical field have, right? So case in point, I am working on a research project now. And when we were doing the literature search for that research project, and the research project is about identifying, it targets specifically Black and Brown or BIPOC individuals and helping find out what their training experiences were and what they believe microaggressions and how the role, if any, microaggressions played and how they performed and or affected their completion rate of residency. We couldn't find anything that was actually targeted to pharmacy students or residents, but we had to use all of these medical articles instead, because that's where a lot of the evidence and knowledge right now stays. And so what you and I are talking about right now, we don't have an article that's specific to our profession that we can reference because we're not looking into, and I don't know why that is, because
Well, but your research is based on BIPOC specifically, which if you extrapolate that, it's an issue in general, in healthcare in general. Studies that are
correct,
done are majority of the time are done on Caucasian people. And
correct.
so, you know, unfortunately, that is the reality. And I'm glad that you are changing that narrative and you are looking into creating data to support pharmacy students. But could we extrapolate what we've learned from the medical side into pharmacy a little bit? Like when you did your
That is our
research
hypothesis.
evaluation. Yeah.
Yeah,
What
that
did
is.
their data suggest and show to you?
Oh, their data suggests that people that are of Black or Brown, belonging was a challenge. Many felt like um, their learning experiences were absolutely affected by cultural incompetencies. And they're pinpointing or speaking about things that have nothing to do with their aptitude. And I think this is what's very, very painful for me. I want to believe that no matter what the situation is, we are going to focus on the intellectual capabilities of all people, their abilities to learn, to execute, and to meet and or exceed the expectations of the program. But when we have non-intellectual factors contributing to how an individual is evaluated, or how comfortable or lack thereof a learning environment can be for an individual, we can't be surprised that those non-intellectual components of who they are has an impact on how they perform intellectually. This requires research. This requires um, radical interrogation of the process and how we educate in order for us to understand and begin to tease out how do we train the people who are training the next generation? Because we have preceptor
Mm.
development models, we have all these different things that a lot of organizations do, but we've never actually taken the time to figure out what the issue is. Like, back to your point, like, when do we know that it is toxic versus you are lazy?
No, I mean, because we talked about our own terrible residency training experiences, and terrible
Yeah.
maybe isn't the best word. And I've had experiences where a preceptor, for example, says she was disappointed at me, and like on feedback, she was like, "I'm disappointed in you." For me, that is not an appropriate feedback, but I don't know if I would consider that toxic. Whereas I had other preceptors where they went behind my back and, you know, said things to my RPD that can actually jeopardize my career, I would say that is toxic.
A
That is
hundred
toxic
percent.
behavior. So
A
then,
100%.
you know, like both caused me a lot of pain, both caused me a lot of sadness, but
Yeah.
one is actually terrifying because I was very scared about what my future career looks
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
versus the other one I'm like, you need to be a better preceptor. Like you need to know how to give better feedback. This is not
Feedback.
appropriate conversation. But
Yeah.
I look at two situations very, very differently, right? And
Yeah.
I think that that nuance needs to be hashed out so much
100%.
because
Yeah.
we can train our preceptors to give better feedback and all of that, but I don't know if it's going to be touching on the actual toxic part of
Yeah.
abusive
Because,
healthcare training.
and that is about recognizing that our preceptors are people. I don't do my job without bringing the people part of myself to my job. And I want to believe that that people part of me being a teacher is going to be suitable for all learners. It may not be. I could, in fact, behave or say something that a learner could find inappropriate, but I want to believe that I am creating intellectually safe space with the learner that they can bring that to my attention and not feel like their evaluation is going to reflect that or that I'm going to leverage my entire network against them, right? My experience, that's what it was. People began formulating opinions about me that I have never said a single word to, not even so much as good morning, good afternoon, but they genuinely believed that I was abrasive, that I was angry, that I was combative, that I was difficult to teach from one preceptor's encounter, right? That's toxic.
Yeah.
That's
When you
toxic.
don't feel safe
I
at
don't
the
feel safe. That
facility.
was what it
Yeah.
was, right? I no longer felt safe, even when there were opportunities for me to step up and showcase a unique talent of mine. I was happy just flying under the radar because I didn't need the judgment. I didn't need, but it's kind of like for me as a Black woman, when you tell me that I am angry, combative, and abrasive, that triggers a lot of different emotions in me. Those are very, very dangerous words to throw my way. So
Hmm.
for me, when when I find myself in a space where I'm like, okay, I was advocating for myself. I was speaking up for myself. That somehow has now become labeled as combative, difficult to teach, and all these different things I have never heard about myself before. I am learning about myself here. I am just going to retreat because the other thing I also have no interest in is changing other people's minds about me, especially people I felt had not taken the time or energy to get to know me as I am, right? That's toxic. I still carry that till
Hmm.
today.
Hmm. No,
But
I know. I would say like even after years of graduating, I'll stand in my kitchen sometimes and I'll just something will trigger me and I'll just spew out all this anger that I have of the situation. And this is like 7 years later of what I had experienced. I'm like, how could they do this to me? Well, how is that normal? How is that okay? You know,
how's
you
that
carry a
okay?
lot of that pain with you. It's
Yeah.
trauma that you just like carry with you. And
You
it is and that is very painful. And that is very true. We need to pinpoint exactly where those things are happening and why people feel like they have the power over residents and trainees, right? But what about, in the article that I mentioned about, what about things like doing extra work from home? Is that
yeah.
toxic?
It
Is
is
that
not.
harmful?
It is
See, that's
not.
where we need to draw the line, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm all about it. My students will be the first person to tell you. Don't come on rotation with me and think that your day is going to end at 4:30, especially if you're a resident with me. Your day does not end at 4:30. I don't apologize for that. Part of what I want you to learn is that your commitment doesn't end when the clock hits 3:30. Your commitment is based on your promise to provide exceptional patient care.
I
If
mean,
that
this
means
is this is specifically for trainees and
yeah,
students and learners,
yeah,
because when you're graduating and you're practicing and now you're talking about decades long career and you're
yeah,
talking about more of like a better work life balance. That's a little bit
yeah,
different, right?
it
But
is.
this is like you're training, you are learning, you are building a
Yeah,
foundation for your career. It's a
yeah.
little bit different. It's a different mindset.
It's a different mindset you have to have. And I tell all of my students this. I'm like, I know Nowadays, it's work smart, work smart. I don't believe in it. It's a place you get to. You have to work hard to get the skills, the foundation in order for you to work smart. Otherwise, you are going to harm somebody. And that is a horror I do not wish on anyone.
Yeah.
Focus on working hard. Focus on working hard. Focus on learning how to build it from the ground up. Focus on learning how to recover from failure. Focus on learning and accepting that failure is a guarantee in your career if you decide that you're going to push yourself further. Residency is one of those things. It's an optional thing. You're not required to do it. But if you decide to do it, you need to understand that you cannot come in there and goof off, and you cannot come in there and just count the days. It's
Be-
going to be work.
because my fear, right? One of my fears and one of the fears that the article brought up is when we are so quote unquote soft on our
Yeah.
residents and trainees, um, it it leads to this kind of like it snowballs into something else. Like now you're scared to give constructive criticisms to your
Yeah.
learners because you don't
Yeah.
know, like, what if I say something toxic? What if
Yeah.
I traumatize somebody because I have to tell someone like this isn't the right way to do something. You need to change your style here.
Yeah.
It is it can be very scary for the person giving the feedback. And I tell you, like, sometimes I go through precepting and I've hit a couple of bad situations. I think maybe I should just be this chill preceptor, like the chill girlfriend. Like maybe I'll just be like the chill girl, like the cool girl. And I don't say anything negative. I give everybody positive feedback, and then I get all the positive feedback back, and then I move along and I live my life that way. Like, but that's where you get to when you don't know where to draw the line between what if this is really toxic versus not. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we can train our preceptors to do all the exact perfect things. But then if our learners are having trouble receiving the pain and the growing pains that they need to grow, then like that's also dangerous in itself,
It
right?
is.
A two-way street.
And is there room? I would ask, is there room for us to do the development in this area um, side by side, preparing learners that this is going to be hard. And like I say it a lot, there's no LinkedIn lives where I don't say it. Like, residency is hard. It's going to wreck your life. It's supposed to. Don't go into it thinking that this is going to be someplace I go and hang out for 8 hours. You're going to be there 10, 12 hours. No one is even going to tell you good job. They're going to look at you like, you were only here for 10? I bet you could have gotten it done if you stayed for 12. Like, that's the energy.
Yeah, maybe you should get in a little bit earlier.
You should come in a little bit earlier. If it takes you 3 million hours to work up one patient, I gave you 4 and you're not done, you may need to come in a little sooner.
See, but these are expectations, right? These are expectations that you need. But the thing is, you need to also have these expectations on yourself.
Yes.
You don't want to be the pharmacist that's taking 3 million hours to work up 2 patients.
Yeah.
Because when you are no longer a trainee and people depend on you for things, you need to have built those skills. And the only way that you've built those skills is you work really hard.
Yes.
Right?
It doesn't happen without hard work. Like, and that's the message that I'm on. And, some people are like, well, you almost sound like you don't want people to do residency. Well, I don't want ill-informed individuals to do residency. I don't want lazy people to do residency. The people who get into residency, they need to be well-informed about what they are signing up for and go in there and understand, like, we are going to work really, really hard. That way, you've already mentally prepared yourself for whatever is about to come down the pike. That's why I tell them, if the challenges you're facing in residency are more personal than they are performance-based, your RPD has a job and a responsibility to help you navigate this year. Talk to them. Talk to them. Talk to them again and again and again. But I believe that, like, that was one of the things I didn't do. Like, when I retrieved completely. Like, I spoke to no one. I just took it and took it and took it and just made peace with whatever the opinion is about me. I'm fine. I don't have the capacity to deal with it, right? And I don't advise anyone to do that. I don't advise anyone to do that. I think that if you are having challenges that are outside of your performance, or those challenges are affecting your performance, you may be contributing to how toxic it's becoming by staying quiet, to be completely fair, right? Like, they're not going to know that they need to intervene to help mitigate a situation if they are unaware of it, right?
Yeah.
But are we indirectly contributing to like a generation that's going to come up that is just going to be more sensitive and more? I just don't like thinking in extremes, right? I don't like to think that exercising a little bit of sensitivity in how we deal with people, I don't think that's bad. But I also don't think that like sitting at your desk and crying because you can't figure it out.
See, and
Like,
that is a struggle that I have, right? Because you might be crying not because somebody else is this toxic person, right?
yeah,
You might be crying because you as a person have created all these narratives about yourself. It's a
yeah,
mental block. It's your own journey that you need to get to. But
yes.
it's your own mental block. Like I say, hey, Sally, not Saleh, but Sally, a student. I don't know why I said Sally.
I can't, but
Hey,
you
Sally.
and everyone else. You and everyone else. Sally, Sally, girl, my
No, no,
bad.
no. So let's say I have a student named Sally. That's what I am
Let's
at
do
for
that.
some
Let's do
reason.
that. Let's do that.
Sally, I want to talk to you about your performance. This is like, let's say it's a midpoint evaluation, right? So I'm always taught to do like a, uh, a sandwich, like a feedback sandwich. The
Oh
first spread
no.
is positive. Oh
Oh
no, let me just
no.
say. So I'm like, Sally, you've been so great on rotation in terms of how you interact with the medicine team, in terms of how you interact with the patients. They seem to really like you. The residents really take your recommendations and they're implementing what you're doing. And I think that's really great. And I love that you're able to build these relationships with people. An area where I think you can improve would be your efficiency in working up patients. I noticed that it took you 2 hours to work up a patient for pneumonia, even though we've had other pneumonia cases before. It seems like you really struggle with this one. Um, what do you think, and how do you want to move forward with that? And then, of course, I'll end it with like something positive, whatever. And that's just kind of what I was taught. But, Sally version A could take that really well. And she could be like, okay, I'm doing really well here, but there's something that I can work on. 2 hours on a patient is probably not a good idea. I'm glad that Thu gave me the feedback to work on my efficiency. I know it's important for my growth. I'm going to try X, Y, and Z, right? But
Yeah.
Sally version B could really freak out and only hone in on, I am not efficient in working up patients. Oh my God. And it will just freak out. And then the next time she works up a patient, she's just like freaking out because she's like, I need to get this done in an hour. I need to get it done in an hour. And she's frazzled because she doesn't even she can't even focus on how to get it done, even though during the conversation we talked about ways to do it. But she's now so in her head, she's freaked out, she's completely and then she's spiraling like, I'm
Yeah.
not good at working up patients. I don't think I belong in a residency. I'm so bad. I suck. I'm a
Yeah.
horrible resident. And spiral, spiral, spiral until you are crying in your office. And it's
Uh-huh.
like, and I don't want to be like, who's at fault here? But I'm just saying, like, could the preceptor have given better feedback? Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe it could have been a better way to provide that feedback. But also, Sally needs to find a way where she's not so hard on herself. She's not taking it so personally, and she's not like spiraling because
Yeah.
of a constructive feedback. And I tell you
Absolutely.
that that is not an example that I just made up in my mind. I've had that
Oh, no, no, no,
experience.
no. It's not. It's not. It's really not. It's not
And
even
that is
uncommon.
that
It's
is
not
so
uncommon.
harmful, because when you're talking about, are we like, I don't like, are we allowing that kind of, we're not holding people accountable to how they react to important conversations like that.
Conversation. So I think like when I give feedback, same scenario to Sally. when I get to, I don't know why you
She's
started.
a different name.
You made me laugh. So if I'm giving Sally that feedback, I think my approach would be, and the students, like, they know when I come to them and ask them, show me how you do this. They know they've messed up. they know, they know that I'm coming in with information because I want to understand, first of all, like, what steps did you take? So like if you submit a drug information response and I come in, I'm like, walk me through your process of how you did this. Oh, well, I went to Google first, and then I went here, and then I went here, and then I went here. Because that way, the feedback I can give you is step one needs to be a lit search. Google ain't gonna be that. Dr. Google, we're gonna put Dr. Google in a parking lot for that, right? Like, first, lit searches, right? If they ask you a drug specific question, go to the monograph, see what are the references in the monograph. Like, let's go through that. So I would focus, like, I would ask her, what is your process of patient workup? Do you use a patient monitoring form? Let's maybe develop a patient monitor form, because I literally will turn whatever negative feedback it is, I'm turning it into homework for you. This is why I know your day is not ending at 4:30. You're going to go home and submit a patient monitoring form to me the next day. We're going to review it. We're going to start using that form consistently, and you'll start to see how you get faster. It's because you're organized around how you review the chart. I know you don't know the computer system. I know you, but like, when you tell someone that you need to become more efficient, there's absolutely nothing toxic about that or how that's been delivered. But if this is the first time they've ever heard that they need to improve at something, they are probably just like, oh my God, I'm failing this rotation. You could go
Yeah.
on and tell them 10 other nice things. Like, one of my preceptors used to say that all the time. Like, pharmacists are people that can make 10 interventions a day. Like, they made meaningful interventions that could have saved someone's life that day. They did 20, 30,
Yeah.
50 of them. They forgot to give a patient Colace liquid who has an NG tube, and they gave them a capsule. That's the patient they're going to remember that day,
Yeah.
not the 50 people that they saved. So we know that this is already built into like the people who go into pharmacy. And this is why I go back to like what you say. We need training on both sides, teaching students how to hear difficult things and not internalize that is very important. And the only way that we teach you that is if you hear it, baby. Like, you're not,
Yeah. Yeah.
you gotta hear, like, you gotta hear difficult things in order to grow. Like, I don't know how I would have done anything I've done so far through, like, if people telling me, consider doing it this way, would have been like, I would have taken that as like, oh, they think I don't know what I'm doing, or like I'm
Yeah.
dumb, right?
Yes, and that's not a healthy way to, approach a situation like this. But, you mentioned that my students shouldn't expect to leave after 8 hours of work, right? But
Oh,
some
ma'am.
students may see that expectation as toxic. They're like, she's not allowing me to have proper rest. She is expecting me to work like like a crazy person. Like that is
Sorry.
not appropriate. And so, it's one of those things where whew, it's one of those things where it's tough. And that's where like the conflict begins because you're like, but this is what I expect from a student. And the
Yeah.
student's like, but that's toxic. That's toxic behavior. You're expecting me to
No,
work for free.
no.
You know what I mean?
Mm-mm. That's not toxic. One to three times a week, you're not gonna go home and go to happy hour and go to no. 1 to 3 times a week, you're gonna go home, and when you get in at 8, I'm looking for an email by 8:30 with the reading I assigned for you to do like 12 hours ago,
Yeah.
whether you want to do a residency or not. And it's why, like, it helps me to know whose residency, whose fellowship was that. I want to personalize their learning experience, but the expectation that you're going to work hard here. And when you move on from my AmCare rotation and go on to another rotation, there are skills I want you to be able to show up with at the next rotation. Your counseling skills, your drug interaction reviewing skills, your ability to problem solve. I
Mm-hmm.
don't care what the problem is, but like, you know how to globally look at issues and solve them, because that is what we do as pharmacists. I want those preceptors to know, like, okay, it's evident that you had a decent care experience. You know how to look at a patient's med list and work them up very quickly. You can't leave my rotation and some core skills are missing
Yeah.
because you don't want to put in the extra time. I think that's where I draw the line. I think when I think about toxic, I think about non-intellectually based things that contribute to how you perform, like preceptors that are just straight up inappropriate, either sexist, misogynistic, or straight up racist, just saying things that don't have any space in a learning environment or a work environment. Like,
Yeah.
because those are the things that block me from being able to learn. But like, when I'm like, I gotta read 3 articles overnight and be able to talk about it tomorrow. Okay, I gotta go. Everyone, like,
Right. And
go to
I
the
think this conversation, I know that, it started out as maybe you thinking that we have different approaches to this topic, but I think most of people are very much in the middle, exactly where we are, is that both sides, preceptors and students and learners, need to be taught and given the tools to handle this really difficult space.
very,
A lot
yes.
of the well-being people out there, well-being, wellness people
Well,
out there will say container, is that it's a difficult container to be in, where
okay.
you are learning really difficult things and you're being trained to do very serious stuff. And
Yeah.
that means there's a lot of expectations on the line, right? But we need to kind of figure out what is actually toxic and what's not, because in order to really solve the problems, we need to really hash that out. But yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else you want to talk
No,
about in terms of that?
and I don't have much else to add. I think we really touched on all of it. To all of the learners out there, like, really dig in, like, dig in. If you decided to take this road, commit yourself to the journey. And I always just say the benchmark should just be that whatever I'm experiencing, is it interfering with my ability to learn to the best I know I can?
Yeah.
If you can answer that with absolute certainty as a yes, get help. This is not one of those things I would tell you to keep quiet about, because I did and it didn't work out for me. Talk to someone, anyone,
Hmm.
help you navigate where you are.
All right. Well, I'm glad that that's your final words. I think that that's really important for everyone to hear. But
Right.
we're going to take
Yeah.
a quick break. And then when we get back, we can touch on the idea of residency and funding and our residents being compensated well enough at this
Whew.
time. So we'll be right back. Hi, everybody. We are back. And Saleh was just saying that she almost felt like tearing up in this episode. And I was just saying, we're always just crying on this episode or on this podcast, anyways. So,
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on the idea of residency training and compensation. There's been some conversations out there saying that residents, the compensation has not changed despite everything else that's going on with the economy, with inflation. It has not really moved towards to match inflation, basically.
Yep.
And this is where my deep dive came in, because I want to make sure that when we're having these types of conversations, that it's well informed, right? This is the
Absolutely.
place for information that is not
Not
clinical. No, but
nothing.
it's but we're going to be talking a little bit about the business,
Yeah.
the business of pharmacy residency.
I just can't. It's your expressions that just get me laughing. Even when you're talking about something serious, then you're making these expressions that kill me. Uh, teach
But
us. Teach us.
Saleh, have you been a part of residency funding? Like, do you know that process well? And what can you tell us about what you've been involved with?
Yeah. So I have never been a part of either establishing or applying for an expansion, because these are all things that are money related for a program. If they want to go from one position to two position, there's like a ROI thing that they have to submit. But as a member of like a residency advisory committee, I know that your performance, all of the ways that the resident decreases the need for a full-time pharmacist to be somewhere. So those staffing shifts, it helps save the department money. So I know that those financial contributions that you as the resident make are important in the programs keeping themselves open or growing a position. The other part is that when ASHP launched a grant program to help grow positions, that was the other contributing factor that we see after 2021 is there was a grant program that ASHP launched where people can apply to get an extra position or actually start residency programs. I looked into that. I looked at that a little bit because I thought I would be interested to like start a PGY1 AmCare focus one. But I've never gone through the process to fully understand like how does this thing look and the things I have to put in there to make my case.
So surprisingly, a lot of PGY1 funding comes from CMS, actually, Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services. I know. This is where the deep dive came in. I found it and then I went on this rabbit hole.
Teach us.
Okay, are you guys ready? Okay, this is my favorite part. I love teaching this stuff. Because I find it so fascinating. I've been a resident twice. I've been preceptors of residency programs for almost a decade now, and I never ever thought about where does the funding come from. I always just assumed that it was coming from the entity itself. So I found this really interesting Q&A article from ASHP. They uploaded like the PDF file from it, so I don't know how old this is. Reimbursement for pharmacy residency programs is defined in the Code of Federal Regulations and established by CMS. Pharmacy residencies fall under 42 CFR 413.85 Part E, which is actually used for cost of approved nursing and allied health education activities. This section is more commonly known as paramedical education and is identified on Medicare cost reports as such. It's important to note that reimbursement for pharmacy residencies is separate from 42 CFR 413.86, which is payment for direct costs of graduate medical education, which is for medicine, osteopathy, dentistry, and podiatry programs. So CMS provides two different separate reimbursements, one for pharmacy and the other health education activities, and then one for the actual, it's called the direct cost graduate medical education, which is for physicians and podiatry and things like that. So pharmacy practice residency training programs that meet requirement may be eligible for Medicare reasonable cost reimbursement. This reimbursement is frequently referred to as pass-through payment because the costs of approved educational programs operated by provider are considered separate from inpatient hospital operation cost and are excluded in the calculation of payment rates for hospitals paid by the inpatient prospective payment system. Therefore, residency program expenses pass through the IPPS to be paid on a reasonable cost basis. So it's not part of what hospitals will send to CMS for reimbursement. It's a completely separate thing. In order to be considered for reimbursement, these residency programs need to be set up under a provider status. And oftentimes, this provider is typically an inpatient hospital. However, in some cases, providers in unique circumstances may qualify under regulations, even when they're not referred to as an inpatient hospital. So you actually have to have, your training has to be under a provider status. Yeah, so that's why I'm always curious if your PGY1 is somewhere else, not within an inpatient or a health system. How do you qualify what provider would be managing this program? Because the pharmacy program is under pharmacy department, but it's actually within this provider status of the whole entity. So I find that really fascinating.
Oh my gosh, I'm learning today.
Now, specialized PGY2 pharmacy residency programs are not eligible for reimbursement because the certificate achieved is not recognized as a requirement to work in the specialty area by industry norms. CMS defines industry norm as more than 50% of hospitals in a random, statistically valid sample. So, in the future, if the industry norm expands to require a PGY2 residency, these programs may become eligible for Medicare reasonable cost payment. Now, the reason
Interesting.
why I bring up all of this is because there's actually been a campaign from different pharmacy organizations trying to actually increase reimbursement for these residency programs.
Yeah.
ASHP actually wrote a letter, and they wrote a letter to the Honorable Xavier Becerra, the Secretary of Department of the U.S. Health and Human Services. The letter also went to an administrator at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and then a Neera Tandem, the Director of Domestic Policy Council. So ASHP actually sent out a letter in November of 2023. Okay, so
Oh,
it's very recent.
very
And
recent.
this is from Paul Abramowitz, the CEO of ASHP. And essentially, what the letter is saying, and I'll read to you some of this, is as I mentioned, and I'm reading the letter now, as I mentioned during a meeting with you at the White House earlier this year, pharmacy residency programs are struggling with problematic audits targeting Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services pass-through funding for the first year of postgraduate residency training. Specifically, since 2019, PGY1 programs across the country have been hit with arbitrary cost disallowances on the basis of cost accounting procedures that had been accepted in previous years and or to different auditors despite the fact that there have been no regulatory changes. I'm asking for your help to stop clawbacks of pharmacy residency funding during CMS or funding until CMS provides meaningful guidance on how PGY1 programs should comply with CMS requirements. These are not high dollar programs with annual funding per program generally running around $100,000. But with audits jeopardizing multiple years of funding, some hospitals are now considering eliminating their PGY1 training programs, jeopardizing the already limited supply of new pharmacists within clinical training.
Yeah.
So there's actually been difficulty acquiring these fundings
Yeah.
and reimbursement from CMS. So that's why I was actually really surprised when you said that more programs are opening up,
Yeah.
because I'm like, but I thought that reimbursement and funding has been on the decline.
That grant. I know that that grant, people have gone after it aggressively and it helped. But also, I know that independent pharmacies, they can apply for either grants or fund positions on their own. So community-based residencies are the other ones that have also grown a lot. Um,
And I'm
but
always curious about how those get funded because
oh, I can
I
tell
don't
you,
know if they would qualify under this CMS
they
reimbursement. Oh, you know the answer. Oh my gosh. Teach
they
us, teach
they
us.
they tether themselves to either a college of pharmacy. So you have community-based pharmacies are always either with a chain or a college of pharmacy, but the practice site is tethered to an external entity and they split the cost. So the resident has like Walgreens and staffing components that happen there, and that's how they get their ROI on the position. And they do a business plan. They have to do things
So it comes
for
out of their pockets, though. It comes
uh-huh.
out of the
That's
actual.
yeah, that money is privately funded, but the colleges of pharmacy, they have access to educational grants and other things like that they can put
Mm,
towards the position. But yeah,
yeah,
those
that's
ones, it's
fascinating.
because the residents' time is split between two different entities and they have
Hmm.
responsibilities for each arm because both arms have like a vested interest in that position.
Yeah, that's very
I
fascinating.
don't,
But see, so
this is so,
the letter ends with basically asking CMS, could you please provide us with actual guidance on how to address compliance so that we can actually get some of these funding. And one of
yeah,
the questions that they ask is specifically, we would like CMS to answer the following: how or Are pharmacy residency programs required to have the name of the hospital on the completion certificate? Are there any requirements or restrictions regarding the name of the institution or the authority of the signatory on the completion of certificate? Because they need to be able to prove this provider status that's on the
Yes.
certificate. And that is part of that very specific, strict guideline of how you can get qualified for reimbursement. And also, if a hospital is part of a health system, can the health system CEO signature be used on the hospital's documents requiring CEO signature? Would this be viewed as the lack of control? And again, it talks about just this idea of like this provider status that's managing and operating the residency program. I think the other component of it is our marketing materials for a provider or residency program that bear the name of an affiliated health system or pharmacy school evidence that a pharmacy residency program is not provider operated, and can a PGY1 program establish a clinical rotation at another site within the health system, provided that the hospital carves out the costs associated with an offsite rotation from its PGY1 cost report. So if you have a PGY1 from one hospital going to another facility,
Yeah.
that apparently does not qualify for this reimbursement because now you're off-site. So then
Yeah.
who's going to be covering the 4 weeks that you're going to be going somewhere else?
Wow.
That has to be, that off-site cost is, is on the program itself, it sounds
Program
like.
itself.
So all
Oh,
of this is just very fascinating to me that I didn't realize these are all things that are part of receiving the CMS reimbursement.
reimbursement for it.
Yeah,
That's so interesting. Yeah.
I
I
know.
had no clue because I tell candidates, ask if they have affiliate agreements. But apparently, there are no financial incentives for affiliate agreements being present because they
It could
don't get
actually
reimbursed.
harm you.
Yeah.
It could actually harm the program if CMS is like, whoa, who's the provider here operating this program? And if it's not specific to
Interesting.
one thing, if it's like, oh, you're affiliated with this other college of pharmacy, okay, well then
Yeah.
who is, the operating manager for this kind of thing?
Interesting.
It's very fascinating to me.
That's very
So
fascinating.
when I
Yeah.
think about like the funding for residency program, and a lot of the residents are saying, our compensation hasn't improved at all to match the inflation rates. It almost seems like some of these programs, they've got their hands tied behind their back because
Yeah.
their funding is actually decreasing as well.
Yeah.
And
But also, dear resident, pharmacist salary hasn't gone up much either. So it's just with inflation is happening and the offers and the raises are now matching up with that. Like many other professions have seen exponential increases in their compensation in the last decade or so. In fact, pharmacists saw pay cuts because we flooded the market with a gang of pharmacists, and they were like, "Oh, you don't want it for that? I'll get someone else to do it for that." And so, dear residents, I feel your pain, but we're all in it together.
yeah. And dear residents, this is why we say understanding the business of pharmacy is so important, because
Very.
I wish that, schools teach our learners this pretty much from the first day that they started, is healthcare is a business. And if you can help your entities, if you can help your facilities get money somehow through grants, through
Yeah.
extra funding, through reimbursements, whatever it may be, that is how you're going to be reimbursed well,
Or,
essentially. Yeah.
absolutely.
But anyways, I just wanted to
Oh,
bring that up because I find that to be so fascinating, the business
thank
of
you for the knowledge.
pharmacy,
You're always coming through with the knowledge for us.
the
You
deep dives.
definitely,
Yeah.
you
Oh my
definitely,
gosh. Well, this has been a really interesting conversation so far about residency, and this is not the last. We're going to
no.
be doing way more conversations
Oh,
about
yeah.
what it's like to be a resident and that whole process, but I wanted to have this discussion because it's always very fascinating, the types of experiences
Absolutely.
we have. Yeah.
100%. All
Well,
right.
thank you so much for listening. If this episode speaks to you and you think that others may benefit from hearing our stories, please send this episode to them. It's going to help us reach so many more people.
Yeah, this episode is available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please connect with us individually or through the show page, links for which are all going to be linked below this episode. And you need to know that your support means a lot to us. It helps other people find out about us. So share, write, and write a review for us. And until next time, don't forget that we got
this. Bye, everyone.
Everybody.